This is Graphic Novel TK, your podcast guide to comic book publishing. Hi, welcome to the third episode of Graphic Novel TK, where we talk about the process of building a graphic novel. I'm Allison Wilgus, and with me is my cohort,
Gina Gagliano.
I was going to say you have to say your own name.
Today we'll be talking about the very earliest part of the publishing process, pitching your book. We have a fantastic editor here to talk about pitches, Calista Brill. She also will talk about herself, Calista. So Calista, tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Calista. I'm about 5'6". No, okay. I am the executive editor at First Second Books. I've worked here since 2008, which I think means 9 years. I acquire and edit about half of the books on our list with the partnership and help of the rest of the editorial staff here at First Second.
What percentage of your job is getting and reading and reviewing pitches from authors?
So I've actually never crunched that.
Like intuitively, how much of your day?
Is it 2% or is it 75%?
I'm going to say it's like 30%. It's a good chunk.
And how did you get into working in publishing?
Okay. So when I graduated college, I had a degree in English and no clear idea of what I wanted to do for a living. And there was a recession on and people were having a lot of trouble finding work. And so I decided I would just apply for every job that I thought I could do without wanting to kill myself. And I would take whatever was offered to me first. So I did that. And it was not publishing. It was a different thing, and I didn't like it. So I started looking for something else, and a friend of mine mentioned that there was a job open at Disney in their publishing arm and that she thought I might enjoy that. And so kind of on a whim, I applied, and it worked out. Sort of against all odds, I would say. And once I was doing that job, I realized I really loved it, that I really enjoyed working in books and wanted to do that for a career.
Okay, so we're going to dive into talking about pitches right now. But Calista, can you start us off by giving us like your definition? What is a pitch? If someone was like, I understand that a book exists, but I don't know anything about this process, what would you tell them that a pitch is?
So a pitch is a document or sort of otherwise formalized piece of information that outlines a sort of attractive and persuasive vision of a book that may or may not exist yet. Typically, a pitch is a digital document that gets emailed to an editor in the hopes that the editor will like the look of it and want to publish the book. Generally, if the book exists already, the pitch isn't as necessary. So usually a pitch is something for a book that doesn't exist yet, for a kind of a vision for a book. A good pitch should be very clear right away about what the book is and who the intended audience is and why it's awesome, and should sort of be tailored to the person who's reading it. So I wouldn't say like specifically for that editor in particular, but for a type of editor, say.
So in terms of like the publishing process, the pitch is like the handshake introduction. It's the thing where it says, hello, this is what I am. Would you like to have me in your book catalog?
Yes, exactly so. A lot of times authors will come to me and they'll say, I've got a bunch of ideas for books that I think you might really enjoy, that I think you might want to publish. Here's, 2 lines about each. And then I kind of explain that I need to see a pitch, right? It's very hard to have an opinion about something that's too short. And a pitch is something that kind of boils down something that's too long and fleshes out something that's too short, if that helps. That's very vague. I apologize.
No, so I mean, backing up for a second, you mentioned a second ago about how you have to be thinking about who your audience is. Like, for instance, like you as an editor at First Second, like what kind of pitches would you like to be looking at, regardless of what actually shows up in your inbox?
So I like to look at pitches for books that make any kind of sense for our imprint, which means that about 90% of the pitches I look at are not pitches I want to be looking at, because they're books that we could never publish for one reason or another, or would never publish. So I really appreciate it when somebody's obviously done their homework and has looked at First Second and said, okay, this is an author-driven, creator-owned house. They don't do a lot of heavy genre stuff. They're not publishing superheroes. They're not really publishing a ton of crime or science fiction. Their books tend to be kind of personal, and even the sort of commercial ones on their list are sort of still have their kind of quirky or literary or idiosyncratic elements. So, it's very difficult when you're an author, obviously, to sort of judge your own work, particularly objectively. But it's nice when people can kind of think through that part of it and just think, okay, is this a book that First Second would even publish? And that's a huge question that I really appreciate when people do that for me, because then I don't have to tell them no all the time.
Or at least not feel like you're telling them no when in a kind of like a formality, like there's no universe in which that was going to happen. And now, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. It's nice to avoid that step if I can manage it.
I'm going to jump ahead a little bit because I just really want to make sure we get to this. I would love to hear, like, as of right now in 2017, what do you think a pitch should look like? Like, I mean, obviously it varies a little bit from thing to thing, but like, what do you think is essential, and what are some kind of nice to haves, and what is stuff that should absolutely not be in a pitch that somebody's handing to you?
So my caveat to this is I'm going to answer your question on behalf of First Second, and I can't really say what other houses
of course,
like and don't like. Okay, my ideal pitch has like a log line or a very, very, very brief explanation of the sort of gist of the book. And sometimes that can just be a single line, or sometimes it's a very short paragraph. That immediately tells me who the audience is, what the general subject is, and what the tone is, right? So I get sort of like very broad strokes. I also like to then have a brief summary of the project that gets into some more detail about the plot. And that can be several paragraphs. And then it's nice to have a very thorough outline that goes sort of scene by scene, that gives me a better sense of the kind of pacing and structure of the whole thing. I don't necessarily need to see an entire script. I usually don't, in fact. It's nice if I can to see a sample of the script so that I can get a sense of the tone and of how the dialogue is playing out. And whether the person who's writing this knows how to write a comic script at all, right? Which is often a big question. If there's an artist attached, or if the author is also the artist, I want to see some character designs and at least call it 3 pages of finished, lettered, colored, if the book is in color, comics art, because it's really important to see if the thing actually gels, right? You want kind of a proof of concept. You want to be able to point at a page and say, okay, I know that this person or these people understand how to put together a story using sequential narrative art in a way that, A, I like, and B, just works at all, right?
Do you feel like you've been in situations where somebody's like giving you pencils or something that look really good, and then as you get further along in the process, you're like, oh wait, the way you're finishing this is not how I thought that you were going to, and now I'm in a pickle?
That has 100% happened to me, so I love to avoid that, because it's not like the greatest conversation for the artist when you're like, oh, I kind of thought you were going to do something different. So,
like, I looked at this other comic that you did, and I thought you were going to do that thing.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you want to avoid that kind of misunderstanding if you possibly can.
And is there stuff that sometimes people include where you're like, this is not a good use of your time, or this is not helpful to me, or...
Yeah, so I would say...
Chocolate?
Well, right. So people don't have to send treats. And in fact, if you send treats with a pitch, it can make your editor feel a little weird. Like, if I enjoy these treats, as they're now a conflict of interest because I've consumed this chocolate or whatever. But
you can only eat the chocolate if you accept the pitch. Otherwise, you have to give it to your assistant.
Exactly. I would say also, I think sometimes there's a temptation to put a lot of time into making a really beautiful, cute package because, it will catch somebody's eye. And it does catch an editor's eye, and it's fun to get like a cute, beautiful thing, but then it also just makes you feel extra bad when you're turning it down. It doesn't make you less likely to turn it down. It just sort of makes it sadder. So maybe not that. And also to that point, like, I don't love getting things physically. It's really hard for me to sort of track and manage that many physical objects. It's a lot easier. All of my systems, and I think I can actually speak for basically everyone in the industry at this point, all of my systems are digital, and it's just much, much easier to handle pitches and submissions digitally.
It's so interesting because that's definitely changed a lot, like in my personal memory. Like, I'm not that old, but I remember when I was getting started, it was the opposite.
Oh, yeah.
Don't send me this big file. I don't know how to use a virus. I don't want it. And now it's like, oh my God, what are you doing?
Yeah.
This is what Dropbox is for. Please.
No,
Please.
I know. I feel sort of bad because I think the rules did change really fast. But until maybe the last like 3 years, the file size thing was something I was sort of like angrily ranting about to anybody who would listen because it was a problem and now it isn't anymore.
Yeah.
So you were talking about the packaging of the pitches. Sometimes an important part of the pitch is the pitch letter.
Mm-hmm.
What do you like to see in a pitch letter, and what is a pitch letter?
So I don't care a ton about the pitch letter, kind of in the same way that I don't care a ton about the cover letter when I'm hiring a staff person. I feel like the pitch letter and the cover letter both sort of serve the same purpose, which is like demonstrating on the fundamental level that you're not incapable of writing a letter, right? So with a pitch letter, sort of more specifically, I guess, one of the things that I like to see is if somebody can demonstrate that they've done their homework and that they know what kind of books First Second publishes and that they have a sort of good argument for why we should look at this one. So, if somebody says, I'm a fan of your company and I particularly enjoyed, Jay Hosler's Last of the Sandwalkers, and I have an insect-driven science fiction adventure that I think, would stand really beautifully with that book on your list, then I'm going to say, okay, that's cool. This person likes my number one favorite book that we've ever published. And also, has sort of thought through whether their book is a reasonable match for us and can write a letter, which is good to know about an author.
Because I know that's like a part of the process people stress out about enormously, but like with all the editorial work I've ever done, I'm mostly just like, it's more like a place where if there isn't a giant red flag, I mostly forget about it.
Precisely.
In 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's like, it's kind of a good mechanism for making sure the person like has their head screwed on straight on a sort of fundamental level. But beyond that, I tend to kind of gloss through the letter and just click straight through to the attachment if there is one. I will interject here.
Yes.
And this also goes counter to traditional publishing advice. I don't like it, and I apologize because I think people are told explicitly to do this, but I really don't like it when people query me about whether they can send me their book or not.
Because this is just another email you have to send?
Exactly. It's like, it just bogs down the process that much more. Like, I don't know. I don't know. Like, it's very unusual that somebody, and I think maybe this is just a feature of First Second being a kind of having an unusually broad range of books that we're willing to publish. But because I think probably this is a more useful feature if you're a very sort of specific genre-focused publisher and you don't publish a certain kind of book. Somebody emails you and they're like, I want to send you my like lighthearted women's fiction about life in New Orleans in the 1920s. You can be like, I'm sorry, we're like a edgy crime publisher. I don't want this, right? But for me, it's like everything sounds plausible to me until I actually look at it. So like, it's almost never happened that somebody has emailed me with a description of the book they want to send me a pitch for, and I've said, you know what, save your breath. Like, don't bother. I know I don't want it. I'm always going to be like, well, I don't know. Maybe I want it. It sounds okay.
So that reminds me of another question. To my knowledge, there are 3 acquiring editors at First Second right now, and I feel like most imprints have more than one.
Yes, that's absolutely true.
Do people, I mean, I think I know the answer to this question, but people listening to this might not. Do people need to know ahead of time which editor is the best one for them to be working with, or should they just send it to the editor they either have met, like had a relationship with, or like maybe talk to at a convention or something, and trust that if you, for instance, look at this and you're like, you know what, this isn't my thing, but I think Mark might like this, that you're going to take care of that and they don't need to be sitting there stressing out about which editor.
That's totally correct. I mean, and again, this is one of those places where I sort of have to emphasize that I can answer this question for First Second and basically no other house, because we also have a sort of an unusually kind of team-driven, loosey-goosey dynamic for a conventional trade book publisher. So, it will often happen that somebody will send a book to Mark that he's like, nah, it's not really for me, but I bet Calista would love this, or I'll feel the same way. Or Robin, our associate editor who's acquiring now, she and I often share submissions with each other. The important thing is sort of like getting See, again, like grain of salt, right? Because if you want to be published by First Second, the important thing is getting somebody's attention at First Second. It probably matters less whose attention it is, because we're pretty good about sorting out sort of who has bandwidth for something and who has a particular interest in it on our own. And there's not really a difference between how well your book will fare depending on who your editor ends up being. Like, it's not as though if you want your book to be like treated really nice, you have to publish with Mark because he's the editorial director, right? Like, all of our books are sort of evaluated on grounds other than who the originating editor is. So I would say it's probably not a thing to be particularly concerned about.
How do you feel about people sending copies of all of their previous work or some of their previous work if they think that you're not going to be aware of it along with their pitch?
Physical copies, no. Because you guys we're in my office right now, and it's actually not as bad as it used to be, but there's just a lot of books in here, and I don't want more.
So handing you 3 books at a convention is a no?
Well, they're just going to get thrown out. I actually tell people not to, because people who give us physical stuff at conventions run the very real risk that the stuff is just going to get trashed or lost, right? Because we're not set up for intake. All we're trying to do at conventions is get rid of stuff, i.e. sell books. So the sort of like flow of objects is moving in the wrong direction for that process. But, if somebody's pitching me via email, which is what I prefer, and they want to send me links to their other work online, like, that's very useful. Because I want to know, have they finished work elsewhere? Is it good? Do I like it? Do I think it makes sense as a sort of comparative title for the thing that they're pitching now? Or is this a big, change for them? If it's a big change, like, how do I want to handle that? Do I want to sort of emphasize the work that they've already done when I'm pitching the thing in-house, et cetera, right? It's useful to know what their body of work is. I just don't want to have to physically deal with their body of work.
How much does the author play into the pitch that you're getting? You've talked a lot about the story, but clearly there's a person involved as well.
That you're going to have to work with for a minimum of 3 years.
So I run full background checks on... No, I don't. A lot. It's not the deciding factor. Like, I'm not sort of arranging my list around people who I think would be fun to work with, regardless of whether they have a book I think makes sense for me to publish. But I need to know that the author is professional and friendly and sane, and also is like invested in a career, right? Like, that's really good for me to know. If I know that somebody can be relied on when their book comes out to put some serious time and energy into promoting it, that makes a big difference for me. It's sort of disappointing when you sign up a book with somebody and you think it's really good, and the time comes for the book to come out and they're sort of not as enthusiastic or not as present or not as available to do interviews and do events and sort of be the public face of the book as you were hoping, because that actually really affects sales. Obviously, there's no guarantees when you're just meeting somebody new. You can't be like, I'm magically intuiting that they will behave a certain way 2 years in the future. But, you want to have sort of the sense of somebody that they have a kind of a commitment and passion about their book publishing career that you can use then to sell books for them.
Yes. And if you have an author who is submitting something or planning to submit something and sees you at a convention or at an industry event or is following you on social media, you said you don't want to get a pitch document for them and get that by email. But is there like a good thing for them to say to you?
Oh, to like remind me that we've met and that we
or when they're meeting you for the first time.
And they have a pitch coming in 2 weeks or 4 weeks or
they're even thinking about pitching you later.
I mean, this sort of falls in the same category as cover letters and pitch letters, right? Which is like my requirements for those interactions are extremely basic, and it's basically just like, don't like frighten or anger me, and we should be fine.
Like, don't come running up with like their plastic sword and like hold it up in your face and be like, hello.
That sounds really great, though. So like maybe that's not the best example, because that would just charm me. No, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's sort of like it's useful to know that somebody's capable of behaving in a professional way with a stranger. So like if you can sort of pass muster along that extremely basic level, then that's useful to know. But beyond that, if somebody like says something awkward or forgets to say the right thing or forgets to sort of introduce themselves appropriately, the truth is I meet a lot of people at conventions, and I remember very few of them because it's conventions, and that's sort of what happens.
That's another universe. We were talking earlier about universals of the experience of being in the world, and I don't think it gets, although it gets worse, the older I get, the more I'm like, I've probably met you at some point in the last 36 years. I don't freaking know.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway.
No, I've taken to, like, I was emailing somebody this morning because I'm hoping that he'll illustrate a book that I'm signing up a script for, and I was sort of debating how to start the email, and I ended up just saying, I think we've probably met once or twice. Anyway, it's nice to be in touch with you, because I was like, I don't fucking know. I probably have met this guy, but I can't remember, but I don't want to assume that I haven't, so.
How does having an agent change the pitch process?
It does change the process. I go to some pains to make sure that it doesn't change the business dealings, because I think that people tend not to negotiate for themselves as aggressively as an agent negotiates for them. And so when I'm dealing with people who don't have an agent and I'm like actually getting to the business of making an offer, I take that into account. You know, I generally start out with a number in mind that I want to try to land at, and how I get there depends on who I'm talking to, right? So that's something that I try to be pretty scrupulous about. For second is sort of unusual in that I think probably about half of our authors have agents and about half don't. And it's really important for me that the folks who are dealing with us unagented aren't being penalized for it. But that having been said, there are certain sort of inescapable realities of why it's better for an author to have an agent if they can. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it actually ends up being in the pitch process, right? It matters a lot less after that point, but it's sort of an agent is a person who gets you in the door in a lot of cases. And one of the reasons that that works the way it works is there are agents who I deal with all the time, who I have relationships with, and who I have a strong incentive to have a good relationship with on an ongoing basis, right? Because I have a lot of people in common with them. And so when one of those people sends me a pitch, I am strongly incentivized to get back to them quickly because I don't want them to be mad at me. And I would love it if a stranger who sends me an unagented pitch also wasn't mad at me because I took a long time to get back to him. But pragmatically speaking, that affects me less if I've sort of ruined somebody's month by taking a long time to get back to him versus, made certain agents angry by not getting back to them right away. So I have an incentive. And then also, sort of less self-servingly, agents, when they are doing their jobs right, act as sort of gatekeepers in the best way, mm-hmm. which is to say they are an intermediate person who takes a look at a thing and says, I really don't think, with all of my sort of acumen and experience, I don't think that this is a good match for House X, and so I'm not going to send it to House X, right? I'm going to send it somewhere else instead.
So an agent will be like, I talked to this Calista Brill, and she is like, I like kittens the best, and I do not like crocodiles at all. I will not send this crocodile manuscript to her.
Exactly. I hear that Cassandra Pelham at Scholastic just loves crocodiles. Let's send this to her and whatever. Exactly.
Although I want to stress, we're making this up. Please don't trash your crocodile pitch that you're about to send to Calista.
I know. I'm like, every time I say something like this by way of example, I come to regret it. So I don't know. I feel also maybe I've somehow like impugned Cassandra Pelham's excellent character. So forgive me if that's the case. But
good.
She's probably really good at publishing crocodile books. It's kind of useful for me because I see so many pitches, right? We've established I spend about a third of my time just reading submissions. It's really nice when I have somebody who only ever sends me things that are kind of, worth my time, right? By which I don't mean like good, I just mean appropriate.
Because it could be the best crime novel in the world, but you're not.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm actually really curious about this because I don't know the answer to this question at all. When you have an agent like you talk to a lot,
sure.
Does there end up being like a sort of condensing? Like you'll have a phone meeting with her and then you cover like 5 or 6 people's worth of business. Like, is that part of the advantage?
No,
I don't actually know.
That's 100% true, and also it never occurred to me before just now. But that's actually a really good point, and it does make my life much easier. That I think probably like a good 60% of the people that I work with right now are represented by 3 people. But that does, actually, you're right, that does sort of, there's a sort of a level of efficiency, because when I need to talk to an agent about one of her clients, I'll end up, just sort of running through the Rolodex and checking in on everybody, and that's very useful.
So when a person pitches you, how soon can they expect to hear back?
You knew we were going to ask this eventually.
Can we do Foley that's just like footsteps leaving the office and the door closing behind me?
We want to stress, because this is the number one conversation that I have with other cartoonists when they're pitching you or somebody else, in terms of like, this is what's normal. Please don't crawl out of your own skin with anxiety.
It's the worst, and I have the world's guiltiest conscience. Just for the record, is this my opportunity to say that on the record? This is on the record. I feel real bad. It varies enormously, depending on whether it's somebody I know, depending on whether it's an agent that I know, and also just depending on how slammed I am, right? The thing is, I wish that I could say, like, if you don't hear back right away, it's a pretty good sign that I'm not interested. But even that isn't true, which is sort of probably extra infuriating for people, because it has happened that this is embarrassing, but I've had submissions sitting in my inbox for, like 6 or 8 months. And I keep kind of looking at them and thinking, there's something to that. And then getting distracted. And then finally, after a kind of an egregiously long time, being like, no, you know what, I'm going to do it. And like finally getting back to the person and being like, I like your book. At which point they're like, who are you? Waiting and waiting and waiting to hear back from somebody, unfortunately, doesn't always mean that they're not interested. That having been said, when somebody comes to me and they say, I sent this pitch to you 8 months ago and I never heard back, and I just wanted to let you know I'm sending it out wider and so is interested, this will have one of two effects. One is I apologize like profoundly and sincerely and wish them the best of luck. And the other is I think, oh shit, I'm about to lose this and I actually really love it after all, and I'd like try to buy it really quickly, right?
If you don't have an agent and you've sent your manuscript or your pitch, what is the time when you should check back in? Is it 2 weeks? Is it a month? Is it 6 weeks? Like, when do you want to hear back from people if they don't have a specific update, like I got another offer?
Okay, that's a really good question. And again, I can only speak for myself, although I feel like this is maybe sort of good practice in general. I would say give it a month. A lot of stuff happens in an editor's life, and one of the things that tends to happen is we'll have like periods of intense busyness that have to do with a couple of specific projects that suddenly heat up. So I can lose like a couple of weeks just working intensely on a couple of things and not doing anything else. So it's nice to have at least a month to kind of clean up other messes before I get back to submissions. I certainly don't mind being followed up with after a month. If somebody sends me a follow-up email after 2 weeks, it doesn't annoy me. If they send me a follow-up email after a week, I'd say it does. So I feel like
that's fair.
That's my threshold. Yeah, I think is like give it at least 2 weeks, but maybe preferably a month. But then after that, I would say follow up a few times. Maybe not every week, but like every month or so, right? It's not a bad idea. I don't think there are many people in the world who would be like, oh, this person has emailed me several times in the last 6 months, and that has angered me, and so I'm not going to publish their book, even though I otherwise would have. Like, you're not going to do yourself any harm, I don't think.
And I know this varies from person to person, but for you personally, what is the etiquette of, one, are you expecting people to only send pitches to you and not to anybody else? And two, if they've sent pitches to a bunch of people at the same time, do you want them to let you keep you updated if they've gotten offers on stuff?
Yeah.
Because people get very anxious about this, so I'd love to hear for you personally, at least, what your feelings are on this.
Well, so I'm sure it's nerve-wracking, and again, it's probably particularly nerve-wracking if you don't have an agent and you're trying to negotiate all of this and sort of not ruffle any feathers, but you also have to defend your own interests. Like, there's a good argument for trying to get an agent, right, is so that you just can save yourself some heartache. So I will say that the only cases under which I have any expectation that I'm receiving something exclusively are when the person has told me so, or if it's somebody who I have worked with previously and where we've had conversations about wanting to, publish that person long term. There's a sort of a general expectation that they're not going to suddenly start shopping their book around to other publishers without a really good reason, right? There are people that I've published long-term who will have like side projects that just don't make sense for first second, and I appreciate when they, let me know and they say, I'm sending this elsewhere because I was pretty sure that it didn't make sense for you guys, and then that gives me a chance to say, yes, of course you're correct, but thanks for checking with me. But if it's if it's a new relationship, if it's somebody who hasn't queried me before, I have no sort of expectation that I should be the special snowflake who's only receiving the thing. I like it when people send it to me all by myself. It's nice, but it doesn't like make me more likely to publish the book. Neither does it make me less likely. It's just sort of another piece of information, I guess.
So what kind of updates are appropriate for people to send to you, do you feel?
The more the better. Like I really, and again, I can sort of only speak for myself, but because I am so perpetually behind on everything, and because I'm so bad about getting back to people on a timely basis, I really appreciate it when people do follow up with me. Just in general, this is like if anyone ever wants to work with me in any capacity, like I tell people I respond well to nagging, which is true. I would much rather know that somebody has sent me something exclusive, has decided to shop it around more widely because they haven't heard back from me, but still would rather publish with me. Like that's really important. That's important information for me to know. It's also important for me to know that they want to shop it around widely, and maybe it's fine if they don't publish with me, that they're like annoyed or whatever. That's also good to know. So it's basically like the more information, the better. And there's never going to be a case where I sit on something for a while and somebody doesn't hear back from me and they think, fuck it, I'm going to send this to Oni or whatever, right? Like that's, it would be ludicrous for me to be annoyed by that. Like, you know, they have their interests, they have their book. Like, I'm honored that they shared it with me in the first place. And if it's something that I think I actually want to get serious about, then that's a good prompt for me to get serious about it. And if it's also a good prompt for me to think, okay, you know what, let me graciously pass on this one, which is maybe more often what happens. But
so if they get an offer from another publisher, you'd like to know before they sign that. You'd be like, hey, I'm talking seriously with this other publisher. They've made an offer on this book. I want to let you know. You don't want to get an email like after the contract is done to be BT Dubs. Well, you missed the boat on this one.
I don't, but I also kind of feel like I don't have any grounds for serious annoyance when that happens.
Oh no, I'm more just thinking from the author's perspective. Yeah, it would be a good idea to keep you updated.
Yeah,
on
absolutely.
That kind of thing.
You know, I mean, it's one of these things where I'm sort of I don't know, whatever. I want to be like I don't want to be a dick. There are a lot of opportunities that present themselves when you're an editor where you can be an asshole. And do you guys have like language standards on this? Should I not be swearing?
No, it's fine. Right. That ship is largely sailed.
All right, fuck it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm co-hosting this.
Yeah, right, exactly.
You've met me.
I'm talking to. So wait, I sort of lost the train. Basically that there's very little that somebody can do that's actually going to like piss me off or that I will interpret as sort of bad acting, except if I feel like they haven't been upfront with me, right? Like if they've gone to some pains to establish that I have something exclusive, I don't want to then find out that they took it elsewhere without telling me first. I also don't love it when people take an offer and use it to extract an offer elsewhere, although people do it, and it's not like, you know, against the law or like profoundly unethical or anything. It's just like mildly annoying. So, you know, that's something to think about. Yeah, I feel like that's happened to me once or twice, and I've been sort of like annoyed, and that's kind of been the extent of it. And probably it got the person a better deal in the end, so it was probably a good gamble for them. I mean, you know, one of the sort of weird things about publishing is that, particularly at a house like First Second, which kind of prides itself on sort of honest and congenial and affectionate dealings, you know, between authors and editors. There still is ultimately, at the end of the day, this element of conflicting interests, right? Like the editor's interest is getting the book for what they think they can, sort of the minimum that they have to pay for it, and the author's interest is in selling the book for as much as they can possibly get for it. And there's nuances there, right? There's reasons that I don't want to screw people. And there's also reasons that an author might not want an unearn-outable advance, so they might not want to be too aggressive.
We're almost out of time, so there's been a couple lightning round things. One, reality check time. What percentage of pitches that you get end up books that you're actually publishing? Okay,
so this isn't good news.
Yeah.
I don't know offhand, but my guess would be
ballpark. This is a reality check to people whose hearts are broken if they're pitched.
Like First Second is publishing 37 books this year.
Right. How many pitches do we get?
How many pitches do you get in a week, would you say?
Oh, let's do the back. Okay, let's do the back of the envelope. So I think that Mark, Robin, and I combined get probably, call it 20 pitches a week.
That's actually less than I would have expected.
Used to be more. So that's about, it's a little over 1,000 a year. Because I was going to say like 1%.
Yeah.
But maybe it's higher than that.
It's not that big of an industry. It's really
easy
not.
To
forget how there aren't actually that many of us.
Maybe it is higher than that. It's actually sort of nice. Well, here's the really gloomy news, though. If you want, I'll make up for it by offering you something even more disheartening.
No, that's good.
Is I actually did sit down and do the math one time for how many books I've published that came to me entirely cold. Mm-hmm. That is to say, with no reference, no person saying, hey, my friend so-and-so, or like I taught this person and they were really good or whatever, and no agent. And I think in my history of acquiring it for a second, and I don't know how many books I've acquired here, but it's a lot. I think I can think of one. Mm-hmm. So I talk about this a lot when I'm talking to like kids in art school, to comics professionals who are pitching their work. Just the importance of networking, which I know sounds bloodless. What it actually means is making friends with your peers, because when you guys were asking me how important is the author to making my decision, a big part of what reassures me that somebody is going to be okay to work with is that there are people vouching for them. And so if somebody comes to me out of the blue and I know nothing about them, the book has to be just incredible for me to be willing to make that sort of significant risk.
Yeah, Calista, before we go, can you just take us through your mental process from receiving a pitch to the point where you're like, I think I'm interested in this book? Not to the acquisition offer or anything like that, but like who else reads it? Like, is the pitch process just you? Is that in your head, or how does it work?
Okay, so I don't generally share it with other people until I'm pretty certain that I at least think it's worth serious consideration. So the kind of initial vetting just happens with me. And if there is art, I can make a decision about it infinitely faster, because some huge percentage of the projects that get sent me that have art attached, I don't like the art. Or, I mean, I'm being callous. What the actual sort of more nuanced reality is I have very specific requirements for what I think makes sort of appropriate art for a first-second book. And that's a really, really, really narrow and weird and specific little alley. And so most of the projects that get sent me that have art as part of the pitch, I can just like open it and at a glance disqualify it. I love that because that's super easy. And then if the art is really spectacular, there's often cases where even if the story is lagging a little, I'm like, okay, I can work with this person. I can make this story live up to this incredible art, right? So a lot of times the art kind of ends up being like the first helpful. Yeah, exactly. Where I get into trouble is when people just send me scripts, because we do accept scripts that don't have artists attached, and I've acquired a lot of them, and I enjoy it because it's fun then to work with the author to find an artist who's just the right fit for it and to sort of help forge that partnership. But then I have to read the script, and reading comic scripts is the worst. It's horrible and awful, and I hate it, and I've been doing it professionally for 9 years, and it hasn't gotten any easier because you have to exert such an enormous amount of energy picturing what the fucking thing is going to look like that it takes forever, and it's really tiring. So that's a drag. I mean, whatever. I don't mean to be like discouraging.
No, I'm a comics writer. I don't like reading comic scripts. It's
awful. I don't think anyone likes it. It's like this sort of necessary
evil. Some of them are really well written.
Yeah.
And then that's a little bit better, but that's not the same. But that's if you're just reading it. If you're having to figure out if it's going to be a good book, that's like a whole other thing.
Right, exactly. And in certain respects, when the script is very entertainingly written and it has like a lot of like clever asides and stuff, it's almost like, oh, am I getting tricked into thinking that this is like, and then you're like second guessing yourself. It's like, is it actually as good as I think it is? I don't know. When it's a script all by itself, the kind of initial vetting process takes much longer because I have to read a big chunk of it before I have a sense of, assuming that I've read a brief summary and the summary seems like it might be something I would be interested in, then I have to actually read it, and that takes forever. But it obviously it's worth it because it's resulted in all of these really beautiful, powerful books that we're publishing. It's just a part of my job that's really hard.
Okay, so you have looked at the art and read the script, and then what makes the light bulb go on?
Like, now I think I really want to publish this? It depends a lot. Oh boy, see, you don't want to know how the sausage is made because it's made so inconsistently. It kind of depends on my mood, honestly. You know how sometimes you're in the mood to shop and sometimes you aren't? Like for me, I hate buying clothes, but then there's like usually about like 1 month a year where I'm kind of in the mood. So I just buy a bunch of clothes that 1 month and hope that that'll do me for the rest of the year. So it's a little bit like that, because sometimes that part of my brain is all fired up and I'm like, I look at something and I can just know this is the book, I want it. And I look at another one, I'm like, nope, that won't work. And then sometimes I just like wallow in a morass of confusion for a few weeks and before I finally like force myself to make a coherent decision. So it's really variable. But once I have a pretty good sense that I think I want to publish a book, I start planning ahead to conversations that I know I'm going to have where I convince other people that I should be able to publish that book. And that can kind of help decide things as well. Like if I'm thinking, okay, I have to justify this to our publisher, he's going to say, why should we publish this and not something else? Or we already have a bunch of books with this subject, why would we do another one? I know that I need to be able to have an answer that will satisfy him. And he asks reasonable questions. You know, he's not asking this stuff frivolously. So, you know, I kind of have these like little invented conversations in my head where I try to make the case before I know I'm going to have to make the case. And a lot of times that helps eliminate things as well.
We're almost out of time. Is there anything that you, coming from your own heart and your own experience, that you really want to make sure that you're kind of getting out? Anything we haven't asked you about, or kind of a note that you want to end on personally?
So I have two immediate conflicting interests or impulses, and they're like actually literally exactly the opposite of each other. So maybe I'll say both of them and
please go ahead.
Just decide which one to listen to. So one of them is not to be disheartened if things don't work out right away, because there's a lot of cases where people have pitched me multiple projects and I've said no and said no and said no, and then the right thing comes along and I say yes. And there's also cases where, you know, people have been sort of struggling in the industry for a long time and they haven't found the right house, and they find the right house, right? And so I think in terms of sort of getting published with a house like First Second, sometimes you just have to kind of keep bashing at it, right? And the right thing eventually comes along. So that's one thing. But then the other thing is also sort of have a plan B, because I think it's like it can be really emotionally sort of harrowing for people going through the pitch process, especially if it's a book that makes sense for First Second, because the books that we publish tend to be very personal, right? They tend to mean a lot to the people who are making them. We're not looking for books that are sort of made by like savvy industry journeymen who really know how to crank out a whatever. Like we're looking for sort of things that are deeply personal, and those books are scary to put out into the world, and it's really sad when somebody doesn't want it. And so I think, you know, having like multiple creative projects going at any given time and sort of having multiple outlets for them, I think is really good. And I guess maybe these aren't like conflicting pieces of advice, but kind of try to cushion yourself, right? So that everything isn't riding on whether one or two houses want to pick up this one project that means a ton to you.
Yeah. And also, like, I mean, I know from personal experience, it might still work out with that one project.
It really might not,
yeah. You know, like I'm drawing my book right now.
Yeah.
I think I pitched to you guys like literally 6 years ago or something.
Exactly, right.
So it's like just for somebody else, but it's one of those things. It's like, you know, it worked. If it's a good project that people want to read, it'll work itself out eventually.
Yeah, and if it means that much to you, there's probably a reason that it would mean something to somebody else. You know, you just have to find them and get it out there.
Great. Thanks so much, Calista.
Calista, thank you so much for talking to us about this.
Totally. It's my pleasure. Listen, my area of expertise is so incredibly narrow that it's actually really fun to get to talk about this stuff, because it's like all I know about.
Thanks for listening to Graphic Novel TK. Our next episode will be about agents, so tune back in 2 weeks to hear us talk about this vital but often misunderstood industry job.
Yeah, so, because, I mean, as always, we did talk about agents today, but, like, we sort of skipped over that like a stone in the lake. Yes. Next time we'll...
What did they actually do all day?
Yeah,
it's
no.
a mystery.
Surprisingly...
One will come and tell us these secrets.
Because according to this episode, they just email pitches to Calista and then talk on the phone with her, and that's it, right? Yes. Clearly. No, that is not it.
More to come.
Yes. So that's the thing. Because TK means to come. We're very clever. Graphic Novel TK is co-produced by Gina Gagliano and Allison Wilgus and is brought to you by The Beat. You can find our show notes along with other comics news and podcasts at comicsbeat.com. Our podcast graphics were created by Shivana Sokdeo.
Our theme music is by Poddington Bear. You can follow us on Twitter at graphicnoveltk or email us at graphicnoveltk@gmail.com.